This is episode 4 of Asterix and the Indomitable audio series. Welcome to it. After a long while, but it's finally back. My name is Alan, hoping you are doing well whenever you're listening to this, wherever you may be in the world right now. If you've been waiting for the return of this series, I do apologize because I had been so busy offline, with real life. So not having had a chance to get back into recording this content, it really sucked. But here we are now. So hopefully the wait has been worth it. Now, if you've noticed the audio quality, I'm not recording on my headphones because I'm guessing the firmware for them is out of date because it's been a while since I've used them. So I decided, okay, let me go old school, and I'm recording on my phone. Hopefully for this episode, and then in the next episode we'll be back to recording using the headphones. So in this episode we're taking a look at book 4 in the Asterix series, which is Asterix the Gladiator. Now, Asterix the Gladiator was first serialized in the comics magazine Pilote. It's a French and Belgian comics magazine. It was serialized from issue number 126 to issue number 168, and this was in 1962. And then it was collected and published as a volume in 1964, and the English translation, which I was reading from, was done by the team of Anthea and Dereck Hockridge, and this was published by Brockhampton Press in 1969. So let's get into it. The year, of course, is 50 BC. All of Gaul is occupied by the Romans. Well, all but one small village of Indomitable Gauls who have held out against the Roman Empire. And this small village, however, is surrounded by 4 fortified Roman camps of Aquarium, Totorum, Laudanum, and Compendium. So our story begins in the Roman camp of Compendium, where we see the soldiers are standing at attention because an important visitor has arrived. And this visitor is the prefect of Gaul, Odius Asparagus. He arrives and he is met by Centurion Gracchus' army surplus, whom he is come to see. And Prefect Asparagus, he explains the reason for his visit. He is heading to Rome on leave, and as a custom he wants to bring Julius Caesar a gift. At first he thought of getting Caesar just a humble gift of a marble memo tablet so he can carve out his important stuff like appointments and so on. But he realized, okay, that's just an ordinary gift. He needs to up his game a bit. He needs something much more special. And so he decided, here's an idea. Let me bring Caesar one of these so-called invincible Gauls that are known around these parts. Now, when the centurion, Gracchus' army surplus, hears this, he's shocked, of course, because he knows about the Indomitable Gauls, and he tells the prefect that, okay, it's a nice idea, but these Gauls are infamous for a reason. They are invincible. And that's exactly the reason why the prefect wants to gift one of them to Caesar. And so Gracchus' army surplus, he takes a moment to think about this. And then he points out that at least one of these invincible Gauls might not be as much of a threat as the others. And that one particular Gaul is the bard, Cacophonix. And he often takes his walk in the nearby forest by himself to find some inspiration for his music, which is an acquired taste. And so when he learns about this, the prefect, he decides, okay, since this particular Gaul might not be as dangerous as the other ones, I'll settle for taking him as a gift to Caesar. And then we shift over to the Gaulish village, where we see the man in question, Cacophonix. He's on his way out of the village, heading to the forest. We see Asterix. He's outside his house, just sweeping. and he says goodbye to Cacophonix. Obelix shows up. He also bids farewell to Cacophonix, and he at first he just warns Cacophonix not to go into the forest, and the bard takes this as Obelix is maybe looking out for him, and he's like, oh, okay, I appreciate you warning me about the forest, until Obelix clarifies and says, well, no, actually the reason why I'm saying not to go into the forest is because your singing is going to scare away the wild boars. And Asterix and Obelix, they have a big laugh about this at Cacophonix's expense, because just when he thought people were looking out for him, no, actually they were not. So that's the bard for you. So we go back, as in we shift out of the village, we go into the forest, and we see a troop of legionaries being led by a decurion. And they are on the mission to capture the bard. And at some point, the decurion stops his men after hearing a noise. And nearby, we see the bard has found himself a nice spot where he can begin his singing. And he belts out a few lines of his latest song. There's a nice website that I found which lists the lyrics for the particular songs that Cacophonix sings in each Asterix volume. They show the French lyrics, and then the English lyrics, and then the German lyrics, and they also include the references to what the songs are nodding to. So I thought that was pretty cool. So in the show notes for this episode, I've listed all the lines that Cacophonix sings in this volume, as well as the references to the real life songs that they are making out to. So please check the show notes when you're done with this episode. So Cacophonix he started singing, and it's enough for the soldiers and the decurion and the nearby forest animals. They're now fleeing the scene because, of course, Cacophonix's singing again is an acquired taste. It's not everyone's cup of tea, of course. So once the soldiers are far enough from Cacophonix's singing, the decurion shares an idea with his men, a way for them to not have to deal with his horrible singing, and at the same time be able to approach him. And so they decide, okay, they're going to stuff their ears with parsley, of all things. And luckily for the Romans, they are in an area of the forest where there's plenty of wild parsley growing, so they've got enough for them. So after stuffing their ears with this parsley, the soldiers return to Cacophonix's spot, and after giving the order, the decurion, he approaches the bard alone, and then all of a sudden he stops and realizes, I'm the only one who's approached the bard. Where's everyone else? And then when he looks back, he discovers that his men are still hiding because they didn't hear the order, because their ears were stuffed with parsley. So unfortunately for the decurion, when he discovers this, he unplugs his ears, and Cacophonix, he thinks that, the decurion is a fan who just shows up to admire his singing, and so he starts singing another song, unfortunately for the decurion. And this time, the decurion, thinking much better this time, he knocks out the bard before he can, get going with his latest song. And so once they've captured the bard, he's bound, he's gagged, and they carry him off. And this is seen by a little boy who runs off back to the Gaulish village to report what he has seen. So we catch up with soldiers. They have returned to the camp, and the decurion reports to the prefect and the centurion that the mission was a success. And so Prefect Odius Asparagus is pleased by this. He's realizing, capturing the bard wasn't so difficult. But the centurion, Gracchus Army Surplus, says that the real trouble now will come when the other Gauls, they find out what has happened to the bard, and they respond to this. And immediately the prefect realizes, I guess now is a good time to leave the scene. So he's got his slaves, they They gather him up, they take him out, and he's gone back to, he leaves the camp heading for his galley with Cacophonix. And then back in the village, we see Asterix. He has stopped by the quarry, and he knows to Obelix that, Cacophonix hasn't returned yet. And to Obelix, it's not really much of a concern. If anything, it's good news because, well, they don't have to hear him singing around the village. So if he's not around, it's not a big deal, no problem. And then the boy who spotted the Romans carrying off the bard, he shows up and he tells Asterix and Obelix what had happened to the bard. And this boy, his name is Pick and Mix. And once Obelix and Asterix find out what has happened to the bard, Asterix, well, of course, he is not happy about this. He sees it as an insult, while, Obelix finds it a little odd that, well, the Romans, why have they taken the bard? What do they want with him, of all things? And so Asterix and Obelix, they head to speak to the chief, Vital Statistics, to let him know what has happened. And when we find the chief, he is being held up on his shield by his shield bearers. He's picking some apples. And when Asterix tells him that the Romans have taken the bard, at first Vital Statistics, try saying that fast. He thinks that, well, Asterix is, trying to make a joke with him. And then when Asterix mentions that, well, he was captured by the Romans, this, finally sets off the chief, and he won't stand for it. And he declares that, okay, now the Gauls need to go over to the camp and deal with the Romans for what they've done. So now it's up to the druid, Getafix, to prepare some magic potion. And soon now we see the warriors of the village, they're lining up to get their fill of magic potion. And sure enough, we see Obelix is in the line as well. He gets to the front of the line, and Getafix, again, this running gag, has to remind Obelix that he doesn't need magic potion because he fell into a cauldron of magic potion when I was a baby. So he already has the superhuman strength that the magic potion grants to anyone who drinks it, of course. And then we get a speech from the chief saying that they must go over and teach the Romans a lesson. Of course, they have nothing else to fear but the sky falling on their heads. The usual speech from Vital Statistics. We go back to the camp of Compendium. We see the centurion, Gracchus Army Surplus. He's delivering his own speech, counter to the one that Vital Statistics was delivering. And he's telling the troops to stand ready and tells them that, of course, rather than fearing about the sky falling on their heads, they have nothing to fear but the Gauls, of course. And the Gauls, they are on their way. They're traveling through the forest. And eventually, as soon as they are spotted near the camp, the alarm is sounded. The Gauls, of course, just easily plow through the entrance of the camp, and we get into the quick battle between the Gauls and the Romans. And at some point, the centurion, Army Surplus, he meets Asterix, and Asterix wants to know what has happened to the bard. And the centurion, of course, he realizes that he's no match for Asterix, so he easily tells Asterix what happened to him. Explains that, the bard has already been taken by the prefect. He's already on a galley which is headed for Rome, where he'll be presented to Caesar as a gift. And now, realizing that, well, they are wasting their time now dealing with these Romans because the bard is not there, the Gauls, they leave the camp, they head back to their village. And so now, back at the village, we see, Asterix and Obelix, sharing some thoughts about the bard, about, okay, this is the situation now. Is there anything that they can do? And then we catch up with Cacophonix on the galley. At this point, he's no longer bound. He's still bound, but he's no longer gagged. So he's able to have a chat with the prefect, and he tells the prefect, well, Caesar doesn't, deserve him as a present, despite the fact that the prefect, of course, is looking forward to presenting him as a gift because, of course, Cacophonix is one of the invincible Gauls. So this should be a big deal to Caesar. We see the slaves who are, rowing the galley, and they are being led by, the slave driver who's got his whip. There's another slave who's, drumming along to pace the rowers. And so the prefect, he orders, for the men to row faster. And Cacophonix, he steps up and he offers to motivate the rowers with a song instead of, watching them getting whipped. And so the bard is unbound, and then he strikes up a tune. And as soon as the slaves hear this ungodly singing, they decide, no, you know what? Forget the singing. Just give us the whip. We'll row much faster. Just give us the whip. We don't want to hear any more singing. And unfortunately for Cacophonix, it's back to the chains and he's gagged again, unfortunately. Back in the village, Asterix decides that he and Obelix, they must go to Rome and rescue Cacophonix. It's not a problem for Obelix, but he asks Asterix, okay, how exactly are they supposed to get to Rome? It's a long way to Rome from the village. And so afterwards, they speak to vital statistics, and Asterix says they'll first catch a boat for Rome by the beach. And, the chief, he thinks that it's a bit risky, but he, at the same time, agrees that they can't just leave the bard in his current situation. They have to rescue him, even though not everyone is a fan of his singing, but he is one of their own, of course. So they have to at least rescue him. And then Asterix, he speaks to the druid Getafix, who gives him some magic potion. And Obelix, of course, because he's got his menhir business that he's going to be putting on hold while he's off in Rome, he needs to find someone who can deliver menhirs in his absence. And the one person that he finds to do this job is a certain old man who, of course, he isn't sure if he's qualified for the job, being a senior citizen. And I think this might be our first sighting of geriatrics. I guess he's the oldest villager in the oldest Gaul in the village. But when we see him now, if this is him, like maybe his prototype version, of course he doesn't look like the geriatrics that we know in later volumes, because he makes his proper debut in book 12, and that of course is Asterix at the Olympic Games. So this is book 4, so we're still many books away from seeing geriatrics. But I guess for now, this generic old man might serve as his prototype before we see him. And then afterwards, Asterix and Obelix, they head out of the village, they head to the beach, and they're bid farewell by the other villagers as they head for the beach. So while they're there, they are just waiting for a ship. And of course, how do you stop a ship in the ancient world of the Gauls? Well, this, according to this particular volume, is where we see the famous gesture of how you hail a cab, you hail transport, where you stick your thumb out as you're standing on the side of the road. This is where we see it for the first time, according to this particular volume. So who knew that the Gauls were the ones who invented the gesture to stop some transport. So eventually Asterix, he sees a ship coming along, and it is a Phoenician galley. And the Phoenicians, they are known as famous sailors and famous merchants. And someone on board this galley, he speaks to the Gauls. And this person is a Phoenician by the name of Economic Crisis. And if that name is familiar to those of you who remember the Asterix series, Economic Crisis is going to be a regular character. We'll see him again in other volumes, but this is where he debuts for the first time in the story of Asterix. And he tells the Gauls that they are coming from Tyre and they are on their way to Rome. And Asterix, he replies, oh, they're also going to Rome. So he's willing to give the Gauls a lift and travel with them to Rome. So, of course, if you need a little history lesson, Phoenicia was an ancient region which was along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. And if you're looking modern day now, this is where you'll find Lebanon. And Tyre, that's Tyre, was one of Phoenicia's major cities. I'll put links in the show notes for all the little historical references that are in this volume. So again, be sure to check the show notes for these. So while they are on deck, Asterix sees the team of rowers below, and he asks Economic Crisis if they are slaves. But Economic Crisis, he says, well, no. They're not slaves. They are his business partners. Totally not slaves, of course. But the reason why they are rowing like this is because they didn't read the fine print of the little contract that Economic Crisis drew up right after his company was formed. So, of course, they're not slaves at all. So since they are all, they're headed for Rome, it's not a big deal for the Gauls. They don't have to be business partners of Economic Crisis. They are there as passengers. Not too long from that, the man who's in the crow's nest, he reports that there's a ship not too far from them. And Economic Crisis, he's already alarmed because he thinks, this could be a pirate ship. And this might put their goods at risk of being stolen. And sure enough, it is a pirate ship. And this is where we get the debut of the pirates that are led by the red-bearded captain. And I will see them again many times in the Asterix series. But this is where they make their debut. And of course, the red-bearded captain, he's a little nod to another comic which was running in Pilote around the same time. This would be Redbeard or Barbe Rouge, of course. There was a cartoon that I remember. I think it was in the late 90s or maybe early 2000s, which was called Redbeard. I remember that cartoon. If I can find it on YouTube, I'll be sure to put a link to it in the description, at least for the intro. Maybe some of you might remember the cartoon. So now with the pirate ship coming along, Economic Crisis, he informs his fellow directors, his business partners that, okay, now they have to fight the pirates. But his partners, of course, are there to remind him, this was not part of the contract. It did not say anything about having to fight any pirates, doing any fighting. And they're only just there to row the galley. And so Asterix now seeing this conversation realizes, okay, these guys are not going to do anything. We'll have to fight off these pirates, of course. So we see some grappling hooks being shot from the pirate ship to the Phoenician ship, and the captain is the first man to jump from the pirate ship to the Phoenician ship, and he's also the man we see being sent out of the Phoenician ship back to the pirate ship. And we see the Gauls as well following after him, and they do quick work of the pirates. And of course, the finishing touch is by Obelix, who pushes down the mast, and the pirates are left, drifting out at sea as the Phoenician ship carries on its way. So, debut for the pirates, unfortunately, being met by the Gauls. So, Economic Crisis, he thanks the Gauls for saving them from the pirates. And he mentions that originally he had intended to sell off the Gauls as slaves at the next port. But after their actions, dealing with the pirates, he's changed his mind. He sees them now as friends. And again, he's glad to take them to Rome. Speaking of Rome, we move to Rome and we catch up with the prefect, Odious Asparagus. He has arrived in the palace of Julius Caesar and he presents Cacophonix as his gift to him. And of course, Cacophonix is not too happy about this. Caesar, on the other hand, he sees this gift. He's intrigued because, well, this is the bard from that village of Indomitable Gauls. And he thanks, the prefect for the gift before dismissing him. And then Caesar summons for the Lannister. This is a trainer who trains gladiators. This character named Caius Fatuus. Lannister, of course, I recognized that title because I watched that Spartacus series from like a decade ago. Maybe some of you might remember it. It was on the Stars Network. So Lannister, of course, came to mind. I remember that. So we meet Caius Fatuus and Caesar. He asks him, hey, can you make Cacophonix into a gladiator? And Caius, he takes a look at Cacophonix and he tells Caesar immediately that he cannot, turn Cacophonix into a gladiator fighting machine because he does not have the physique of a gladiator. There's not enough meat on him. So Caesar decides, well, if we can't make him into a gladiator, then I guess the next best thing is to feed him to the lions at the next games before Caesar then orders for Cacophonix to be taken away. And then we catch up with the Gauls and Economic Crisis and his crew. They arrive at their destination. And then he informs the Gauls that from there, Rome is only a few hours away. So if they manage to finish their business on time, Economic Crisis is willing to take them back to Gaul. And the Gauls, they thank him for that. So we see Asterix and Obelix, they're on their way now. They are walking along a major highway to Rome, and Asterix is just looking at this paved wide stone road that has been laid out for him, and he's wondering what does Rome look like? Because if this road is any indication, what more does the big Rome city look like? And just doing some minor research, I'm guessing that this particular highway that the Gauls are on might have been the Appian Way. This is a famous road that ran from Rome to southern Italy. And the port where Economic Crisis and his crew landed might have been the port city of Brindisi. So if there are any Italians that are listening to this, please just either confirm or fact check me on that. But I think that's what we're seeing, the Appian Way, Brindisi, on the road to Rome. So eventually the Gauls arrive in Rome, and of course they are blown away by what they see because it is indeed a bustling city, a busy city, unlike the other city that they'd been to in a previous adventure, Lutetia, which is modern day Paris. But Rome, of course, this major hub of the ancient world, is on a whole other scale. And so now Asterix, he suggests that, okay, they might as well just start looking around, maybe asking some people. Maybe they might have some clues about where they can find the bard. And eventually they make their way to a Gaulish restaurant. So they find themselves a table, and they're joined by the owner, a fellow Gaul by the name of Instant Mix, who has been living in Rome for some time. And he is hoping to save up and then return to Gaul, where he'll open up a Roman restaurant in Lutetia, of course. So Asterix, he tells Instant Mix that they are looking for their friend, the bard, who has been presented as a gift to Caesar. And Instant Mix, the moment he hears this, he's alarmed. He rushes off. But when he comes back, he's got some 2 roasted boars for them. And he tells them that, they should meet him at his place in the evening. He has put his address in one of the boars, and this boar, which has the address, of course, is the one that Obelix has just finished eating, and he makes a little comment that he had some trouble eating that particular boar because it had the address in it. But soon afterwards, the ghouls, they leave the restaurant, and now they've got their first mission now to meet up with Instant Mix once they've got some free time. But that's going to be in the evening. But in the meantime, they can continue exploring Rome, and they eventually arrive outside the Roman baths. And Asterix, he says, well, he's heard about these Roman baths. They might as well go in and have a look. So at the reception desk, they are told that they are to get changed in the apoditeria, which is the changing rooms. And once they've changed out of their clothes and into some towels, they are then led by an attendant to the sudatoria, or the steam rooms. And once they are there, one of the other occupants of the sudatoria just so happens to be the Lannister, Caius Fatuus, who has been made aware of the ghouls by another of the occupants of the room. And so once he sees the ghouls, he's intrigued by them, because he has been searching for gladiators, and now that there are some actual ghouls, and after seeing these ghouls, he's interested in them. So he follows them. He follows them. He overhears them as they leave the room, and so the ghouls, they arrive in another room. This is the Calidarium, which is another hot room, and this is where again the ghouls are just sweating up a storm, going from one hot room to another, but they're joined by Caius, and he offers to be their guide around the baths. And he suggests that they might as well leave this room and they head for the Frigidarium, the cold room, of course. And as soon as Obelix arrives in this room, there's a pool, of course, of cold water, and Obelix just heads for that pool, diving in, splashing all the water out of the pool. And but despite this, Caius is impressed by Obelix's size, of course. And now he's got this idea that I've been looking for gladiators. Maybe these particular ghouls might fit the bill. So then he suggests that the ghouls can now head off to get a massage. And Asterix, he's the first one to get a massage. And the masseur, unfortunately, he is not very gentle with Asterix. And Asterix is not too happy about this. And he ends up knocking out the poor masseur. And the manager of the baths, once he finds out about this, he just decides, you know what, please leave. So he sends the ghouls out, because it's very expensive getting these masseurs, so it's better to get these ghouls out. But again, for Caius, this is also good news, because he was impressed with Obelix, and after getting a demonstration of what Asterix can do, he's impressed by him as well. So fast forward, it's evening now, and we see the ghouls are back on the streets, and they set off for their meeting with Instant Mix. They arrive at the address that he gave them, which is an insula, which is also known as a block of apartment buildings. And unknown to the ghouls, Caius has followed after the ghouls because he's determined to recruit them. But he realizes that he's going to need some help recruiting the ghouls. So Instant Mix, he lives on the third floor of one particular apartment building, and the ghouls, they had decided not to take the elevator, which is, I guess, in the ancient world, in Latin, it's known as an ostiaria. I guess that's it. They decide, we'll just take the stairs, and unfortunately for them, it's a long trek up those stairs to the third floor. But eventually, they make it to the third floor, and they arrive at one of the apartments. Obelix, he knocks at the door, but when Obelix by knocking the door, he breaks the door in, and of course, it's the wrong apartment. So the lady who lives at that particular address, she is not happy, and she tells them, no, Instant Mix lives across from her. So they eventually go there. They meet up with Instant Mix, and he welcomes them into his apartment, which, granted, it's a small flat, but it has all the essentials. It has a cubiculum, which is basically a bedroom. It has a kitchen. It has a triclinium, which is the formal dining room, and it's not bad. It's known. This particular flat is known as a GLC, what he calls the Greater Latin Council. But if there are any British listeners listening to this, you might know this is a nod to what was known as the Greater London Council. I'll put a link to that in the show notes if you want to find out a little bit more about that. So we have the goals with Instant Mix. They settle down, and Instant Mix goes into detail about Cacophonix' situation, mentioning that, okay, the body has been presented as a gift to Caesar and is to be thrown to the lions at the next games, which will take place in the Circus Maximus in a few days. And of course, Asterix is shocked by these news, and he declares that he and Obelix, they will save Cacophonix before that ever happens. And so Instant Mix, he cautions Asterix and reveals that Cacophonix is currently being held in a cell in the circus, and the security there is pretty tight. And he believes that that there's worse to come, and says that the best thing for them would be to leave Rome. But then he adds that the gladiator trainer, Caius Fatuus, is searching for participants for the games. And it turns out that the Indomitable goals are in high demand. So Asterix, he assures Instant Mix that he and Obelix will rescue Cacophonix as he and Obelix leave the apartment building. So once the goals are back on the streets, they are immediately ambushed by a pair of thugs. But of course, things don't go well for the thugs. They are dealt with easily, and the goals, they just carry on their way. And eventually, they arrive at the Circus Inn, which is just opposite the grand arena of the circus. And Asterix wonders if they'll find a place for them to stay for the night. And Obelix, he offers to knock at the door of the inn to find out. And of course, his knocking breaks the door in, and the innkeeper, not too happy with the goals, he charges them for the door and for staying the night as well. So meanwhile, at Caius Fatuus' house, those thugs who had tried their luck with the goals, they meet up with the boss to report what happened. Mission failed. So Caius here, despite the setback, he still remains determined to have the goals, and he orders all his men to get to work to making it happen. So we catch up the next day. We see the goals, they're up and ready. They head into the restaurant portion of the inn to get some breakfast. And Asterix, he's eager to speak to one of the guards from the circus and maybe find out where exactly Cacophonix is being held. So while the goals are having their breakfast, a guard runs into the inn and makes an unusual request to the waiter who has just served the goals. The guard is asking for parsley, so you know where this is going. And the waiter is asking, well, what do you need the parsley for? And this is when the guard explains that he wants to stuff his ears because he can't stand the singing. He can't stand the singing of the particular prisoner that he's looking after. And this is the kind of news that Asterix and Obelix needed to hear. So Asterix suggests that he and Obelix, they should try and question that guard without trying to raise any suspicion. But Obelix, of course, he just gets straight to the point, and he asks the guard where Cacophonix is being held. And the guard just simply tells him that the body is being held in cell 18 in the first basement. But it's supposed to be a secret, so I don't understand why he just decided to blurt it out, even though it's a secret, of course. But anyway, the ghouls, they've got their information. They leave the inn and they head for the circus. So on the way there, Asterix, he takes a swig of some magic potion and he tells Obelix his big plan. They'll go into the basement, they'll knock everyone out, locate the bard, and leave. Sounds easy enough. And when they arrive at the entrance of the circus, there's a guard who tries to bar their way, but Asterix just picks up the guard and just sends him flying. And the ghouls, they proceed down to the cell. And after knocking out a bunch of other guards on the way down there, Asterix discovers that the cell 18 is empty. Another guard spots them. He's got parsleys in his ears, and Asterix, he gets a hold of that guard for information about the bard. And eventually the guard, after being smacked around by Asterix, he eventually tells them that Cacophonix has been moved to another cell, which is in the 3rd basement. After people just couldn't stand his singing anymore, so they just decided, we'll just move him further down. And then the alarm is rang, and Asterix decides, okay, now would be a good time for the ghouls to escape, because they can't just deal with any more trouble. So they leave the circus and they head back to Instant Mix for some advice. They meet him at the restaurant and he reminds them that, well, I did warn you about the security at the circus, so unfortunately for the ghouls, its mission failed. Back at Caius Fatius's house, the gladiator trainer has heard the news about the ghouls trying to rescue the bard. And he figures out that these are the same 2 ghouls that he's trying to recruit. So he tells a servant to relay a message to his staff so that they should assemble in groups of 3 and move around the city in search of Asterix and Obelix. And if this doesn't work, the servant must put up notices around the city with an offer of 10,000 sesterti for anyone who captures the ghouls. And the servant leaves. We catch up with the ghouls again. They leave Instant Mix's restaurant, unaware of there's a trio of Cassius' men who have been waiting just around the corner of the restaurant. So as soon as these thugs try to ambush the ghouls, they are dealt with, and unaware to the ghouls are just moving along on their way around town, just easily brushing off these thugs like they're nothing. And while this is going on, Asterix is thinking over what Instant Mix has said to him about getting into the circus. And, they have to rescue the bard, despite the situation. And, Obelix, he's the one who's noticing, of course, while Asterix is thinking over what Instant Mix has said. Obelix is the one who's noticed that, there sure are a number of people who are coming along trying to attack them. What's the big deal, But Asterix is deep in thought, so of course, even though he's dealing with these thugs easily, he just hasn't really paid them much mind. So during their meal at the inn, Asterix had shared an idea with Obelix that, well, maybe they should become gladiators. And Obelix, he's intrigued by this, and he asks, okay, how do they become gladiators? And for Asterix, he remembers the Roman that they met at the baths, and maybe they can ask him again about how they can become gladiators. So they return to the baths. Outside the baths, though, the ghouls find that there's a crowd of citizens who have gathered to read a pair of notices that have been nailed to the walls. And a few of the citizens, they're interested in the reward that has been issued by Caius Fatius, the 10,000 sesterti. And so one of these people in the crowd, they notice the ghouls who are making their way to the baths. And, they try to grab the ghouls, but of course, the ghouls easily just set them aside and they make their way into the baths. And even the owner who chased them out of the baths the last time, he's at the entrance, he sees the ghouls are there, he tries to warn them off, but he's sent flying out, from the entrance into one of the cool baths in there. So the ghouls, they are back in the steam room. They find Caius Fatuous there, and he starts to panic because he thinks, they've come to attack him, since he's the one who had been sending thugs to attack the ghouls. But so when he tries to explain Asterix instead, he asks Caius how they can become gladiators. And all of a sudden, Caius, he cheers up, realizing that, okay, they're not there to attack him, so he's safe for now. And he assures the ghouls that he's the best trainer in Rome. And so he leaves the baths with the ghouls, and he takes them back to his home. And, for Caius, things have turned around. He had been trying to get these ghouls to recruit them as gladiators for the circus games. And, as far as he's concerned, if he manages to recruit them, Caesar will be pleased with this. But first, he needs to find a way to win over the ghouls on his side so that they can maybe sign a contract with him and Caius can own them. So they arrive at Caius's house. They settle in for a nice meal, and after the meal, Caius hands the ghouls the contracts, which they immediately sign. And Caius then calls for another trainer. This giant man who's called Insalubrious. And Insalubrious, he just comes along, and his task is to train the ghouls for the circus. And as soon as he sees them, he's immediately eager to train them, and he puts them straight to work. So they leave the house and they make their way to the gladiators' quarters, where the other gladiators are seen sparring with each other. They're training, and Obelix, he's called up first by Insalubrious, and he's told, okay, hit me. So Obelix, he swings one arm, he swings another, but he fails to land any hits on Insalubrious, who just simply dodges these punches. And Obelix, he's surprised because he's just used to people just standing there and being sent flying by one of his blows. So now he has someone who, instead of just standing around, is just dodging his blows. So now Insalubrious decides, okay, well, now it's my turn. Let me show you how it's done. And he punches Obelix straight in the gut. But Obelix is unfazed. He just stands there, funny enough. And Insalubrious now, he's surprised because he thought he would be able to send Obelix flying, but surprise, surprise, that doesn't happen. So then he decides, okay, Asterix, you have a go. And Asterix easily knocks Insalubrious out of his sandals, just sends him flying before Insalubrious can finish speaking. So a moment afterwards, after that, we see he's back to training. He's moved on to the next stage. And now he's no longer, pleased with the goals. He's no longer as happy with them because he realized that there's some work to be done here. So he decides, okay, Obelix should train as a retiarius. This is a class of gladiator who usually armed with a trident and a net. And the idea was they're supposed to catch their opponent with the net and then maybe kill them with a trident. So while training, instead of using tridents, they're going to use sticks. So Obelix has got a stick, but Insalubrious, on the other hand, he's armed with a sword, and then he charges at Obelix. But Obelix, he notices that, wait a minute, how come I'm the one with the sword and I'm the one with the stick and you're the one with the sword? But Insalubrious instead, he says, well, I'm not the one who's training, so now that's enough for Obelix. He drops the stick and he drops the stick, he drops the net that he's been given, And as soon as, Insalubrious asks him, hey, why are you dropping the net and the stick? Obelix just drops him, and then he drapes the net over him, just like he's supposed to catch some fish. So Insalubrious, he's done with Obelix, so now he turns his attention to Asterix. He tries to train Asterix, but Asterix, he just easily dodges his attack, and he knocks Insalubrious out again. And that's it for Insalubrious. He's had enough. He's decided to quit. So he just hobbles his way out of the gladiator's quarters, and we see him speaking with Caius Fatuus, and he's saying, he wants his wages. He's done. He's no longer fit for training. He's just going to head back to his father's factory and work from there. So now the goals are left with the other gladiators, and Asterix, he just suggests, well, I've got an idea for a game. Maybe that's something that the gladiators can play. So they decide to play this game instead of training. And when Caius Fatuus, he decides to go and find out what's going on at the gladiators' quarters, he arrives to find the gladiators are not training, and instead they are playing this game with Asterix and Obelix. It's a word game where the idea is you're going to be asked a question, and you're not supposed to respond with yes, no, black, or white. If you respond with either of those words, you're out of the game. So that's the little game that they're playing. And Caius, he can't believe this. He just orders the gladiators get back to their training while he heads off to see Caesar. And so this Asterix looks at this and says, well, this is a good chance for him and Obelix to leave the quarters as well. They should head out. And there's a guard who's at the entrance of the quarters, trying to get in their way, but that fails for him, and the goals are back on the streets. And at some point, Asterix, he sees a crowd of people that have gathered by a notice, a tablet which is on a wall, and he's curious to find out what's written on this notice. And then we just shift over to Caesar's palace, where we see Caius Fatuus representing Caesar with a program for the games. So this is the Grand Circus Games, with the impresario being Caius Fatuus. There'll be chariot races, there'll be the Gaulish bard, Cacophonix, being thrown to the lions, and then we're going to have the main event, the gladiatorial contests with the goals, So the booking office is open now. So upon hearing the program for the games, Caesar is mildly impressed by the lineup, and he tells Caius Fatuus not to let the goals escape, since they are going to be the main attraction. And Caius, he assures Caesar that, well, they are locked away. So there's no chance of them escaping. But as soon as he's out in the streets, pleased that things are going his way, Caesar's happy with the program, and if all goes well, maybe he'll be able to buy himself a farm somewhere. It's all good until he hears the familiar voice of the Gauls, and he's surprised to see that they're out in the streets instead of out training. And Asterix, he commends the Caius Fatuus for the program of the games, having read the notice. But then he adds that he and Obelix would like to make some changes to it. And so now, since that Caius Fatuus is here, Asterix suggests, well, they might as well just, take a trip around Rome and, have a chat about these changes that he wants to make to the program. So now, after, taking a tour of Rome, visiting the Roman Forum and all the other amazing sites, Asterix is certain that they will survive the circus and they will leave, and then they head back to Caius Fatuus's house for supper. And for Caius Fatuus, although he's things have seemingly gone his way, he's not exactly super happy about how things have turned out, because the fact that the Gauls were able to escape the headquarters and now they want to make some changes to the program. So he's not too happy about what has happened. And then after a while, we see the Gauls. They are back at the gladiators' quarters, and at this point, the gladiators, since they have not been training and instead have been playing, just silly games, they are no longer as physically fit as they were before. And on the night before the games, we see Caius Fatuus, who, when we see Caius Fatuus, he's, a healthy-looking man. He's on the chubby side, but with all the stress that he's been going through, unlike the gladiators who've gained weight, Caius Fatuus he's gone the other direction. He's lost a lot of weight now. And when we see him arrive at the quarters on the night before the games, seeing the gladiators again engaged in another game, he reminds them that the games are going to be set the next day. So this is their last night in the circus. And so the gladiators, they speak to Asterix and they tell him that they don't want to fight anymore. And Asterix, he assures the gladiators that they won't have to fight in the games. They won't have to put their lives on the line in the arena. So that's the assurance that Asterix has given them. Then we move on to the next day. The gladiators, having been assured that they won't have to fight anymore, they're in high spirits, and they arrive in the circus all happy. Even the guards are surprised by this because, under normal circumstances, these men are going into the arena where they're going to fight to the death. But here they are, all smiles, all good, everything is fine. Asterix and Obelix, we see them there as well. And they want to see Cacophonix, but one of the guards who's there, he refuses to let them in until Asterix, he starts breaking apart some bars from an iron gate, which leads to the lower basement. And that's enough for the guard to, change his mind, and he accompanies them to the lower basement. So this guard, who is given a name, Appian Glorious, he leads them to the door of a room which contains Cacophonix's cell. There's another guard who is seated in this room named Sender Victorious. And when Happy and Glorious knocks on the door, Sender Victorious doesn't hear it until Obelix kicks the door down, and we find out why Sender Victorious didn't hear the knocking. Of course, because his ears were stuffed with parsley. And we see Cacophonix, and he's always ready to sing a tune, and he starts singing another song. But with Sender Victorious having unplugged his ear, he can't stand it. He's had enough. But the Gauls, of course, they've reunited with the bard. They're glad to see him, and he's safe, he's sound, and he's not afraid of his captors, I guess, because they should be more afraid of him. I guess they've just decided to leave him alone since they can't stand any of his singing. So no wonder he's not afraid of them. So Asterix, he assures Cacophonix that they will leave with him after the games. But first, the Gauls had made a promise with the gladiators that they'll save them. So they have to keep the promise first. So Cacophonix he's got no problem with this. It gives him a chance to witness the games that he's heard so much about. So it's all good. So outside the circus, we see, people are filing in, and, it's the day of the games. So of course, you can expect there's a giant crowd of spectators that's going to be there. And then inside the arena, we've got the gathered spectators. They applaud the arrival of Julius Caesar. We see him in the imperial box, and he's not alone in the imperial box. There's one other person who's not applauding, like the others. And this other person, of course, is Brutus. And even Caesar notices that Brutus is not applauding, and he orders him to join in the applauding, by giving his famous quote, of course, et tu, Brute. And this catches Brutus by surprise, and of course he begins clapping frantically. And Caesar, of course, he just makes a little side note saying that, in the future, Brutus is going to be a problem, of course. We all know what happened to Caesar eventually, so this little mental note is a little nod to that. And of course, it's also a little nod to Act 3, Scene 1 of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, which we did in high school, of course. I remember that very much. So Caius Fatuus, we see him as well. He appears in the imperial box. He's back to his regular weight. He's no longer looking stressed. And he assures Caesar that he's in for a great show. So the festivities kick off with, of all things, a commercial break, And this is in the form of 3 men who are wearing costumes that resemble, those big jars of wine. So I guess that's one of the sponsors for the games. But Caesar, of course, is not too happy about these commercial breaks. But Caius assures him that, well, they need the commercials, the sponsors, because they pay for the sand that's in the arena. So, unfortunately. But anyway, he lets Caesar know that the first event, of course, is the chariot race. Then we head backstage, where there's some bad news because one of the drivers has fallen ill after having too much of the wine that was being advertised earlier. So Asterix and Obelix, they step up to replace him, even though, well, since their event is not on just yet. But the organizer of the race, he objects to this. And instead, the goal should be locked up with the other gladiators. But, since this other driver is, out of commission, the goals are given the go-ahead and they hop onto the chariot and they get into the race. So we have Asterix, he's doing the driving while Obelix is dealing with the other drivers. And eventually the goals manage to overtake one driver. But there's one other driver who's up front who's not going to let them through as they race into the final lap. So what Obelix does is he jumps out of the chariot and with his feet planted firmly on the ground, he grabs hold of that other chariot's frame, keeping it from moving forward. And once Asterix lets Obelix know that, he's won the race, this is when Obelix finally decides to let go of the chariot and it just zooms right out of the race course and into the imperial box. And the driver just crashes into Caesar's lap. And for the crowd who's watching this, it's no big deal. They actually find this entertaining, so they approve this. And of course, Caesar has to play along, but again, he just wasn't expecting the games to be full of this type of comedy. But Caius Fatuus, he's now starting to sweat bullets now, but he assures Caesar that, that there won't be any more comedy because now they're going to move on to the next event. And this is when the bard is going to be thrown to the lions. So we see Cacophonix is being led into the arena by the guards, and Asterix and Obelix, they are nearby, but they are standing ready to step in. And this gives Asterix a chance to drink some magic potion. But for Cacophonix, again, he is not worried. He has not been worried since, arriving here in Rome, because, this is his chance now to perform in front of a big, big audience. So he just steps up. He's by the imperial box and, just gives Caesar a casual greeting, hi, Caesar. But, Caesar, of course, is not too happy about this. But again, Caius has to apologize for the bard not being, as polite as usual. So then Caesar then orders for the lions to be released. And this is when we see a group of lions, the mean and angry looking beasts. They enter the arena. They are not too pleased. They are very, very hungry because it turns out that the lions have not been fed anything outside of yogurt for days since they were captured. So now they have a chance to grab themselves a nice meal in the form of cacophonics. The bard, of course, despite seeing the lions, decides, well, this is his moment. He decides to start singing another song for the occasion. And this song is enough to not only send the spectators scrambling out of the circus, but the lions as well. They hear this song and they've had enough, and they are just sent, yelping and meowing, like pets, and they run out of the arena as well. And Caesar, he's also listening to the song and he can't stand for it, and he demands for cacophonics to be silent. But instead, this just pushes the bard to sing even more. So he starts singing another song. And so now Caesar orders for him to be taken away. And meanwhile, the ghouls on the other side, they're just, in stitches, seeing the bard being dragged away after what has just happened. So at this point, Caesar is, he's boiling now, because this event has not been going as well as he'd hoped it would. After what he has witnessed so far about the games, nothing serious has happened so far. So Caius, just tells him that, well, the serious part is coming up next, because it's time for the main event. It's time for the gladiators to enter the arena. So the real action is coming up, and just in time, the spectators are back in their seats, and they are there cheering on as the gladiators and the ghouls, they walk into the arena. And Asterix, he speaks to the gladiators again to remind them that he'll do all the talking. They don't have to worry about anything. So once the gladiators, they reach the imperial box, they give a special greeting to Caesar, which is in Latin, which is Ave Caesar, morituri te salutant, which translates to Hail Caesar, we who are about to die salute you. But of course, when Asterix and Obelix are there as well, they don't have a fancy greeting for him. Like they just give him the casual greeting. Hey Caesar, how's it going? Because they do know Caesar. They have dealt with him before. If you go all the way back to the first book, Asterix the Gaul, they did meet Caesar there. So then Caesar orders for the fighting to begin, but Asterix, he speaks up and says, well, there's been a change in the program. Instead of fighting, the gladiators will instead play a game that Asterix is certain the audience will be entertained by. So he tells the gladiators to drop their weapons, and Caesar is, again, he's just not happy about this, because he was expecting to see the gladiators fighting. And instead, he sees the gladiators are sitting in a circle on the arena sand. And Asterix, he explains, and this is the little game that he had introduced back at the headquarters. And that's the game that the gladiators start playing. And so when one of the gladiators is eliminated from the game, he goes up to the imperial box, and he wants Caesar's approval, because it turns out he's actually disputing the result of that game. So he wants to find out from Caesar whether is he still in the game, is he disqualified. So he does this by exercising that famous gesture where it's thumbs up, or is it thumbs down? And at that point, Caesar has had enough. He's set off by all this shenanigans. This is not the games that he had been looking forward to. And so now he orders for the gladiators to, put the games aside and get to fighting. So this is when Asterix and Obelix, they step up to the imperial box, and Asterix tells Caesar that you can send out your best legionaries and the Gauls will fight them instead. The gladiators don't have to get involved. So Caesar now, he takes this as a challenge, and he orders for a group of his best to be sent out. And then Asterix tells the gladiators they can leave. And after this, he takes the last remaining bit of magic potion, and Obelix gets ready to take on some Roman soldiers. So the legionaries, they march into the arena. They're all armed with spears and shields, and Caesar instead declares that they should drop their weapons. They should fight unarmed, because he would prefer to watch them beat up the Gauls with their bare hands. But Asterix, he protests against this. He doesn't think that it would be fair. And then he looks back and he sees that, well, Obelix has already started fighting the soldiers. And so the action begins. We see the Gauls easily taking care of the legionaries. And even Cacophonix wants to join in the action with a song to motivate the Gauls. But Asterix, he declines, and of course he just knocks out the bard with a fist. And the audience, of course, is watching this spectacle, seeing these two Gauls fighting off against these groups of Roman soldiers. They're praising the Gauls and they're calling for encores. And Caesar and Caius Fatuus they're watching this, they notice. And even Caesar, he commends the Gauls for entertaining the Roman citizens with their bravery, and is willing to grant them anything they ask, since this is a sign of the generosity of Caesar. And the audiences, of course, they praise Caesar. And so Asterix uses this time to, wake up Cacophonix and let him know that they have been saved. Then he asks Caesar to let the bard free, and also to release the gladiators as well, because their time in the arena is done. So Caesar, he agrees to both of these requests. Then Asterix has one more favor, and this one is for Caius Fatuus to come along with the Gauls for their trip back home. And Asterix, he assures Caesar that, well, the gladiator trainer, he'll be returned to Rome later. And Caius Fatuus, of course, he's shocked by this. Even more so when Caesar agrees to letting him be taken by the Gauls. This is the final favor. So we see the Gauls and the gladiators, they are leaving the arena as the spectators are, cheering for them and, praising them, and they're praising Caesar as well. And Caius is asking Asterix what does he have planned for him? And Asterix just tells him, well, now is the time to teach you a lesson. So that's his punishment now for all the trouble that he's given the Gauls. So now we head back to the harbor with the Gauls. They make it back there. They meet up with Economic Crisis, who has mentioned that they succeeded in selling all their goods and they are ready to set sail again. And this is where Asterix, he introduces him to Caius Fatuus, and his punishment is to row the galley alone. And Cacophonix, he offers to sing for Caius Fatuus to liven him up, to cheer him up, to motivate him as he rows. But that's enough for Caius he decides, no, I would rather just row on my own without the singing. So we just see him starting to row as fast as he can. And eventually, the ship arrives in Gaul. We see the Gauls, they disembark, they thank Economic Crisis for the trip, and he tells the merchant to return Caius Fatuus back to Rome instead of selling him, which could have happened, but Economic Crisis and his crew, they have grown fond of their new business partner, so they're not going to sell him, at least. So of course the Gauls, they are back in the village, they are welcomed back, there's a celebration, there's a big banquet, and although Cacophonix didn't get a chance to sing, but at least he's back home safe and sound. And that's where this adventure comes to an end. Asterix the Gladiator. So that was it, book 4 of the Asterix series. What did you make of this particular one? it is again another adventure where we see Asterix and Obelix. They leave the village and they head off to another country. And I think those particular adventures, those are their strongest adventures, because we get to see what these other places look like during the time of Asterix and Obelix. We get to see all these other colorful characters and the interesting names that these characters are given, the historical references, the pop culture references as well. So it's always fun to read these stories as well. And I think this one is another one of the great ones. There was a lot of comedy, with the gladiators who, rather than being out there fighting, instead we see them playing some children's games instead. We get to see Caesar. We meet economic crisis, and of course we have Caius Fatuus as, I guess, he's the main bad guy of the story, but we also have him being caught up in comedy as well. So he wasn't like a complete threat to the Gauls as well. And Cacophonix, who was at the center of the story somewhat, but not in a major role. Unlike you'll get a chance to shine much later in Asterix and the Magic Carpet. That's many books away. But that's the story where Cacophonix is genuinely at the center of the story, because his singing, of course, will play a role in the plot of that particular book. But I guess in this one, it was the first one where Cacophonix at least had some prominence in the story, but just not anything super major like in Asterix and the Magic Carpet. So that was Asterix and the Gladiator. In terms of trivia and notes, there is a movie which came out in 1985, 40 years ago, which adopts some plot elements of Asterix the Gladiator and combines them with plot elements from another book, which is Book 10, Asterix the Legionary. And this movie would be Asterix versus Caesar. I did manage to find it in the Internet Archive. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So if you haven't watched the movie before, or it's been a while since you've watched the movie, please check the show notes. You'll find the link there. There's an audiobook version of Asterix the Gladiator, which was released in 1988 by EMI Records. This was under their Listen for Pleasure label. It was adapted by Anthea Bell, one of the English translators, and it would be narrated by William Rushton. Maybe some of you might recognize that name. He was an English satirist. He was a cartoonist, and I think he was the founder of Private Eye magazine. If anyone can fact check me on that, please do. But that's William Rushton. I did find some of the audiobooks where he narrated. Not all of them are available, unless if anyone out there was lucky enough to buy the audiobooks when they were still being released. Maybe you've got them at home somewhere in a collection. But online, some of the books have been uploaded. They are available. So I did find the audiobook for this one. I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. And I will also, like I'd mentioned earlier, put a link to the website which offers trivia and information about the bits of music that Cacophonix sings in each of the Asterix books. So again, if you want to know what, like the first song that Cacophonix sings when he's in the forest, there's a reference to that. All of that information will be in the show notes. So that was book 4. The next time we take a look at Asterix and the Indomitable audio series, we'll be looking at book 5, which is Asterix and the Banquet. So if you've got a copy of the book, you can start reading it. And if you have any feedback as well, you can reach me and you can send in your feedback, Or if you have any feedback for Asterix and the Gladiator, you can still reach me as well. All the links are in the description, are in the show notes. So again, please go there. As far as the comic book audio series are concerned, next time you'll hear me, we'll be taking a look at book 4 in the adventures of Tintin. And book 4 is the Cigars of the Pharaoh. So again, if you've got a copy of that book, you can start reading it. If you've got any notes, any questions, you can send them my way as well. So I hope you're looking forward to that episode. Otherwise, I guess that's it. It's good to be back, and hopefully I can, find a way to get back into rotation the audio series. So please look forward to the next episode. And again, thanks for listening. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.